Quick Tech Talk with Michael Anderson and Daniel Sloan.
Hey folks, welcome to the Quick Tech Talk. We are joined by my co-host Daniel Sloan and guest Sid Siefkin, who is the Director of Business Development for Agriculture at BlockApps. And today we are talking about the impact blockchain technology can have on agriculture. Thanks for joining us, Sid.
Great to be here. Thank you, Michael.
So agriculture is an industry really as old as civilization itself. What are some of the issues that you're seeing pop up in the industry today?
Well, there's a number of things that are, I think, quite exciting in agriculture. What we've seen probably over the last 5 to 10 years is really an adoption of technology at a rate that is unprecedented. There's new varieties of seed corn. There's new hybrids that are in the marketplace that have certain characteristics that are very important regionally. You'll see that with some of the specialty crops for food ingredients are really being a focus of farmers that are looking to really kind of expand a portfolio. There's also things like GPS technology that provides for really good data recording at the time of planting or production, getting quality harvest data out of there. So the uptake of data is a part of the way the technology is really, expressing itself in the agricultural world. Another thing that I would probably state as a uniqueness, once we start to capture data in the field from an agricultural perspective, there's always the question of how do we manage that data going forward. Some of the things that are very interesting is to get quality production data, and that production data has value to companies that are ultimately consuming the products that are being produced. I know that there's a number of consumer packaged good companies that really want to have a quality score or an indication of sustainability along the way. And sustainability is really key because when you look at crops like corn and soybeans, there may be specific cultural practices that are designed to reduce a carbon impact, for example. You may have different cropping techniques. And once we are able to record that information at the time of production, that valuable data then can be passed on to other members of the supply chain. So I really think, when I look at it, I think the technology movement, the data movement, and just the overall ability to produce unique products in ag is probably at its highest point ever.
That's really exciting, and especially on the sustainability focus. I think that's something a lot of people are talking about these days, and it's great that you can marry the development of technology you're seeing in the industry also with sustainability of the industry.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, I think.
Go ahead, Sid.
I was just gonna follow up to that. I think it's also important because this is one of the times where that reach has went from the farm all the way to the consumer level. And I think that also is transformational and a very important part of the sustainability capabilities in the system today.
Yeah, that's exciting, Sid. And a couple of things that I picked up on when you talked about that I'd like to have you expound a little bit about is you talking about this data and capturing the data and how important that is to the farmers. Talk to us about how using blockchain in the supply chain and that data, how that's really being disruptive and transforming the industry.
I think one of the things that it is allowing to do is to be able to capture that first block of data and being able to provide the vehicle or the blockchain that will take that information from the point of production into a harvest application, into that first purchaser of the product. And being able to track that information on a blockchain allows for that to increase value as we go through that chain. Each person that takes that product and receives it perhaps adds value, whether that value is aggregation, where that value is transportation and marketing to another value add step in terms of processing or food production. They could take that piece of data that was first selected at the beginning of the blockchain, add their value add to it, and then pass that on, ultimately to wholesale distributors, to retailers, and then for you and I as consumers to be able to get a look at that entire continuum of data all the way back to point of production.
Yeah, and I like the explainer video. It was very simple from the standpoint of kind of following it. Here's the seed, here it went here, and then you're at the grocery store. You pull up the QR code, you scan that, and then you're seeing all that information. I know personally, my wife gets kind of mad at me because I'm sitting there and I'm reading labels because I'm I want to know what I'm putting in my body. I want to know, where this came from. And she's like, just grab some chicken. I'm like, no, natural doesn't mean organic. I want to, let me find the right stuff. And even that sometimes, what is the definition of organic? But if I know it came from this farm and I can legitimately trust that information versus just the marketing that says organic, then I know exactly what I'm buying and what I'm putting in my body. So yeah, that's amazing.
I would say from a consumer perspective, you are not unlike the majority of consumers today that are better educated, a little bit more savvy in the way they're purchasing products. And one of the things that I know from speaking with CPG companies is they're very much brand aware. They want to make sure that their brand statement is fulfilling their commitment to the customer. And so introducing a blockchain to allow credibility, traceability into that, I think is important. And in fact, I think it might be a good place to kind of take a look at, kind of some traditional supply chain and how it may compare and contrast a little bit to a blockchain solution. And I think there's a great graphic here that can help explain that.
Great, let's see it.
So in this particular view, I think it's important to look at what the standard supply chain looks like. You typically have independent parties that are maintaining data that's important for them really in their own systems, right? So think about your own internal ERP system. We want to know if we're buying, if we're selling, kind of what we have in inventory. All of that information has been traditionally built for my company control and internal inventory control. We have perhaps a specific data format that we use. We have a particular ERP that we like. It's very good in providing visibility internal to our systems, right? But it has some limitations as we start to share that with the outside world. If you look on the blockchain supply chain, there are some things that I think are quite significant. You maintain a blockchain so that it becomes a shared ledger. Each member of the supply chain gets to add their information to this. It's visible to all parties. It's available in real time as it transfers from one participant to the other. And that information then can be really visible throughout the parties in the blockchain. And the uniqueness of that, it can help with logistics. It can help with sometimes demand planning, because you get to understand how much inventory maybe is at a distribution point or a retail point. And if all of a sudden our numbers are dropping in terms of inventory, indicating an increase in demand, we can start to take action sooner. We're not waiting for a retailer to tell a distributor that they think there's more demand to tell a manufacturer. That type of information can be monitored real time. So there's some business analytics in place, some intelligence that you can gain from it that I think have value, again, for the participants on the blockchain. Just thought I'd put that out so you can kind of get a feel for how that ledger can go about helping all parties in the supply chain.
Sid, I've heard a lot about FDA callbacks, right? You can have a bad crop of lettuce out of California, and you have retailers that will have to recall a lot of that, right, across the country. How can blockchain help reduce wastes when something like that happens?
Yeah, that's an excellent point that you bring up. And, most specifically, there was an opportunity that kind of showed up in November of 2019 where there were some E. coli concerns around romaine lettuce. And one of the things that was very good is that through some really fast action from the FDA, they were able to try to do some tracebacks to identify where that product has come from. I tell you, there's some really interesting technology around whole genomic sequencing to be able to understand the composition of that E. coli and where it may have started from. And what they were able to do is really narrow that down. So that was in November. By the 4th of December, they indicated that this was from a possibility of 2 or 3 farms in Salinas, California. And that's when they enacted a recall on that particular, quote, lot manufacturing of lettuce. And I think the thing that's unique here is that if you and I were in the supply chain, maybe we're a wholesale distributor, maybe we're a retailer, we would want to know if that inventory that we currently have in our possession is good. Or if it has the potential to have been produced in that particular region in California. And if it has been, then you and I are going to take aggressive steps to participate in that recall and move it away. If for some reason we know perhaps this was slightly a different location. Maybe this was some local product that was produced. Maybe it was production from Arizona that had a completely different origin. We would look at our supply and go, hey, we're in pretty good shape, right? We're not going to discard our product because we can verify its exact origin. And until you get a blockchain level of communication that is transparent through the entire chain, you have a hard time doing that, right? And so heretofore, it has been, I don't know, and I'm not going to take the risk, therefore I am going to eliminate all of my stock and then replenish. And so essentially you're creating waste of product that could be perfectly fine, simply because you don't have enough information about its origin.
Yeah, that's amazing, right?
Yeah, and that's a good note on the regionality, right, of producing crops. As we know in the U.S., there are very different crops that are produced in different areas. And so I can imagine that creates a very complicated supply chain, right? So how are you seeing blockchain impact really the nuanced supply chain of the agriculture industry in the U.S.?
I think there's some things that are very important, from specialty crops, regionally grown crops, and sometimes just localized demand. I know one of the things that is important to me, especially this time of year, is I'm based in the Denver marketplace. We have the King Super Kroger brand here, and they're sourcing a lot of fresh vegetables locally. And it's really nice to be able to see that connection. There may be a very short blockchain solution that's in place, because essentially we may be talking about Rocky Ford cantaloupe. We might be talking about fresh onions from the Brighton, Colorado area, or Olathe sweet corn from the western slope. Well, people on the East Coast are not going to get that produce, right? So they may not need to have all of that information. The locality of that could say, guess what? I've contracted with Kroger. I'm doing it regionally. I can guarantee them on what I would call the mini or regional blockchain, to where it's working with them, their distributor, and the retailer, and you might have 3 steps in that blockchain. And it's very nimble, very quick to be able to do that. And of course, the benefit I get is if they're just bringing in a new fresh load of sweet corn into my store, I can think about my dinner plans for this evening, and I can know I stopped by. So those are the things there that are really good. Likewise, in different parts, I think the things that we've seen is sometimes when you have the CPG companies, they're sourcing products. It may be oats, it could be white corn. I know we've done some work where they have I want a specific soybean grown so that it has some of the right characteristics to produce the product that I'm after. And therefore, they'll go out and contract for that. And in a lot of those cases, then they've got a little bit more control if they take a look at contracts on a blockchain, and that will allow them to say, okay, grower, we're going to contract X number of bushels. We're going to have an identified port of delivery at which we're going to then move that into our production. And so that can happen regionally as well, but it may be for just a very specific ingredient that they want for that product, and now they can guarantee that they've sourced it appropriately and that those contracts have been fulfilled.
Yeah, you're mentioning contracts, so that makes me, and comes to my next question of, we hear this term about smart contracts all the time, and people that know a little bit about blockchain, hear that term. It's actually probably one of the most abused terms in the blockchain industry: smart contract. Why don't you walk through and talk a little bit about smart contracts so we can actually shed some light on it and how it's being used in the agricultural space?
Very good. Excellent on that one. And I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the first things to consider is this concept of what a smart contract can be. A smart contract can be an intangible product in terms of the contract itself. It could say delivery, terms, a quantity. It could be, the exact hybrid or seed that's been grown. And it contractually hits that in that block so that all parties know what that is. It can also represent a physical product. And so I've got one quick graphic on there that I think will help identify what we're looking at for that physical product. So in this graphic, one of the things that I wanted to share is that you may have a very specific product. In this case, you've got a plant protection product that would be used by a grower from, let's say, a herbicide asset. And it is represented as a smart contract on that blockchain. not only is it the physical product, but there are very defined quality information pieces about that. It's an asset type. What is it? The beauty of the smart contract is we can use lots of different ways, different methodologies to identify that exact product, because in some instances it may be more important to others. If I'm a producer and I'm looking at this product, I know it's a Dow product, I know that it has a name to it, I'm getting a 2.5 gallon jug, and I've got an EPA number here that says it's approved for use in my state where my farm was at. So think of that smart contract as a way to hold information that is very specific to the product, whether it's a physical product or an intangible product like a contract, where it really defines what's being traded or traded in the commerce of doing business. So really, I think it's a good way to think about what smart contracts can do. One of the things that's important to do is identify what's important to you as a business, what's important from a technology standpoint. I need this information. Just because you can add more to it doesn't mean you need more. It needs to contain what you need it to so that it makes your job more efficient.
Oh, absolutely. No, I think that's a good explanation. That was a good visual of it as well.
Sid, it's pretty clear that you spend a lot of time in this blockchain and agricultural intersection. Could you help us understand a little bit more about the Strato platform you guys at Block Apps have been developing that's helping support a lot of the innovations that you've shared with us today?
Yeah, certainly. The Strato platform is unique in a couple of areas. One of the things that the Block Apps folks knew is that there's a lot of technology being developed around blockchain capabilities and things like smart contracts that we talked about. We also know there's this whole world of enterprise organizations that want to take advantage of blockchain, but maybe don't want to start from scratch. Maybe they don't want to build from the beginning, and they'd like to have a company with the skill set to help them get started, right? So one of the things the founders looked at is how can we build a platform that allows us to use blockchain tools on a programmable business network that we can take to an enterprise and say, look, off the shelf, we have a backbone in place. We understand that we have the tools to be able to help you develop the things that are going to really make your system a little bit more efficient. When we do that, we typically then would engage at kind of a higher level, right? We would engage to say, what are your pain points? What do you want to track? What is your current methodology today of tracking? Because that's very important. And if you recall from earlier, I stated many people are very reliant on their ERP system, right? They put lots of energy into that. And so when you look through that, that Strato platform will allow them to have the tools to begin with and move forward. As we look at our web page, you'll see a few things there about how we focused on ag. There's some track and trace application that I would encourage you to look at, where we're tracking that product through that supply chain as fundamental tools that come standard on the platform. We have an opportunity to work with a marquee client in Bear Crop Science, where we've done some work to help them in their distribution network. And then there's some other use cases that you'll see. There's some crop insurance programs. There's the efficient use of fertilization, being able to have that sustainable reporting that we talked about earlier. And then there's some traceability from food safety all the way down to some mobile applications that can be the front end, if you will, of data capture in the field that take that information captured and include it on the Strato platform. So we can roll out into an organization and they can start and have the confidence to know the back-end tools are built. If we need to go to an ERP system, we can to grab some data and then allow you to move throughout that. Here's another good graphic that we'll take a look at from an agricultural supply chain management piece. If you go to, I think probably the lowest graphic there, where it shows suppliers being able to take product and move it into the farms or the production, that can be really managed on that same smart contract process through the Strato platform. Moving it from the farmer producer into processors over to the distribution storage is very important, and then often right out to retail. So you get a flow of how this information then gets out to that consumer. And with the proper information stored, that consumer can go, I know exactly who my producer is, and we may even know information about the type or variety of seed or crop that was planted. And so I think there's some really good ways in which at a moment's notice, consumers have more information at their disposal than they've ever had before. If you want to make sure that you're actually getting poultry that is certified organic, right? We now have a mechanism by which to do that. It is taking participation from all members of the supply chain.
Yeah.
If it comes to one point, right, and the processor says, I know what you did upstream, I'm done, right, now it's my product, then it's going to fall apart a little bit. And the question earlier is, how can the Strato platform help? Well, it can have all of that information on that singular chain throughout the entire process, and a little bit of information from each of those participants along the way, really to get that information through the chain. We've built scalability into that platform to where you may go from 10 or 12 transactions in a day to all of a sudden now we've got an industry running on it, and we're doing 500,000 or 1 million transactions as a normal course of running the solution.
Yeah. That's great that you have the flexibility and scalability built in, because we are all consumers, right, of agriculture and of food. And it's like we discussed earlier, like Daniel said, it's really important that we actually know what we're consuming. And so having the power of that information and the consistency really does empower consumers in a way that has never been possible before.
No, for sure. Yeah. Go ahead, Sid. Finish your thought.
Yep, I was just going to simply state that one of the things that it allows us to do is every participant now has the opportunity to raise the bar and participate in that higher level of quality product going through there. And we all have a vested stake. And I think it's important, because if you look at farmers, they pride themselves on doing a great job of production, growing quality products. And if they can be rewarded, that can be financially, that can be rewarded with additional business in the future, that can be rewarded by, hey, you know what, you've really done a good job. There's premiums associated with that produce. You're going to participate in that. And that gives everybody incentive to raise the bar, and we all benefit, of course, because we're getting better product, we're getting it more moving freely through the supply chain, and in a lot of instances, we're probably going to pay a little bit more for that and not even care, because we know that there's this quality guarantee, this brand guarantee, exactly what I'm buying, and I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, absolutely, Sid. I mean, I'm sitting here, and the only thing I'm contemplating and trying to decide is what's more impressive, the Strato platform or that COVID beard you've grown. So, you know, I'm gonna have to cogitate on that. But no, all kidding aside, we appreciate it. I think that was some great examples, some good visuals. And Michael, you have anything else for Sid? I'm super happy with the today.
No, I agree with the beard comment. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
That's
I see you're working on yours.
Maybe one day I'll be as robust as you. But we really appreciate the time today, Sid. Thanks for walking us through just your vast knowledge and going from what's going on in the agriculture industry to what blockchain is doing to empower consumers.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. It's been exciting technology, kind of coming full circle, right? Agriculture is adopting technology rapidly, and probably more so now. If you think about the tools that allow them to do that, farmers have smartphones. We're getting more broadband in rural communities. They're able to access information quicker, and they're as excited as anyone. And so I'm really happy to be a part of new technology that allows everybody to be able to accelerate the game.
Excellent. Well, thanks, Sid. We appreciate it.
Thanks for the time. Daniel, thanks for having
me. All right.
Thanks, Michael.
Thank you.
Guys. Until next time.
Take care, guys.
Quick Tech Talk with Michael Anderson and Daniel Sloan.